we'll go ahead and move on to Adam Warwick with the Nature Conservancy, who's going to talk more about the Southern Appalachian Plant and Wildlife Guide that he put together that Marky mentioned. So Adam, you can go ahead and share your screen and go ahead.
I'm out in the field, so I didn't know how well this was going to work, but I think I found a spot for reception. Can you see the truck?
We're not seeing your truck, we're seeing a picture of a fire.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm doing this off the back of my pickup truck, so hopefully the reception stays good. I found a spot up on top of a mountain. It's called Chestnut Mountain. It's in northeast Georgia. It's about 30 feet just outside of Clayton on the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest. And so I've been traveling around a lot to sites this summer, camping and exploring all of the sites where we've in the Southern Blue Ridge where we've had the most burning accomplished. Either prescribed burning or a combination. And some spots where we've introduced mechanical thinning and different projects. So my friend Mike Brode with the U.S. Forest Service, he directed me to some really good spots down this way. I've been going, I've covered a few thousand acres this summer since about April, taking photos and documenting sites from this book. This is the first, I hadn't seen a rattlesnake all summer, and I got two today, so I'll show some photos of those here in just a minute. So that was pretty exciting. This neck of the woods is known for an abundance of those spots, and I've been spending a lot of time in Pine Oak Heath, so we've got plenty of rattlesnakes around. So last year we worked on this. It was called Considerations for Wildlife, and it was pretty popular. I don't know really how to switch screens, but we've got plenty of copies of that too. It's called Considerations for Wildlife in the Southern Fire and Wildlife in the Southern Blue Ridge, and we did had a really good response to that, and it highlighted some specific wildlife species and sort of what the habit. What fire does to improve structure and composition for those species. So when I moved here from North Florida in the longleaf pine about 7 years ago, it's taken me every bit of 7 years to really get up to speed in fire in the Southern Blue Ridge. It is just as nuanced and diverse as the topography and the biodiversity. And I've started our TNC sub crew in about 2015, and since that time I've gotten to help several different land managers from Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina, and of course North Carolina, and travel to some of these sites. But I really haven't had the opportunity to get back out to these sites in the growing season, and that's really what tells the story of what's going on and how these plants are responding to fire. Of course, our burn window opens up in November on a good year and then closes up in about April. So when it's hot and the rattlesnakes are out, it's not you're not exploring a lot of these burn units, because a lot of them, if you're doing it right, they don't have as much shade from rhododendron and white pine trees. But I got together put together an interdisciplinary team, an interagency team, myself, Pete Bates with Western Carolina, Leslie Stark with the North Carolina Plant Conservation Program, Mike Shafley, and Josh Kelly with Mountain True up here in the mountains. The idea would be to capture some of the nuance of the Southern Blue Ridge fire adapted ecozones in a book. It took me 7 years to get up to speed, but for other folks, I've wanted to have something where if a fire management officer moves here from Oregon, is not familiar with this fuel type, or even moves up from longleaf, it's just a little different system. So what I'm going to do today is just kind of whiz through this book that we're going to probably publish here in about the next couple months. Started out as a booklet, but it's become more of a book now that I've gotten into it. And ideally, it's going to be a publication that's equally useful for scientists, ecologists, fire ecologists, and burn bosses. Um, that was the idea, I think, as part of the Southern Blue Ridge Fire Learning Network. We're always trying to bridge that communication between managers and scientists, and it does a really good job. One of the most interesting aspects of the Southern Blue Ridge Fire Learning Network is our annual workshops and the field trips. Field trips are fascinating, and I take field donors on field trips a lot to some of these places where we've had some burns to try to give folks a concept. It's sometimes hard to picture what restoration looks like in the mountains, because it's not like Longleaf where we have just tons of reference sites where burning never really stopped. It's kind of been somewhat continuous in a lot of places, and so whether it's northern bobwhite or red cockaded woodpecker or whatever, you have these really really pretty photos and places like Carver's Creek, and places you can go walk around and see what restoration looks like. So the idea to take folks on a field trip through this with using this book, and at the same time synthesize the science of what we know about these different systems of the Southern Blue Ridge, these different ecozones that we consider to be fire adapted. So this is just sort of the introduction. Uh, pretty. It's going to have some pretty pictures in here. I'm really proud of these photos. I've really improved my photography skills over the summer for sure. And so it's just a basic introduction that kind of gives some really good context about the Southern Blue Ridge and how and why fire played a role indigenous people and the history of fire in the Southern Appalachians is a big part of this book that I'm really proud of. I got some help from some folks with the Eastern Band of Cherokee to talk about the history of some of these systems, the fire in some of these systems. We start to delve into sort of overview of the systems we have here, the pine oak heath and the shortleaf pine oak, and really get into a big sort of, I guess it's always a discussion point, which is the restoration. When is a site restored, and what's the restoration fire return interval versus what's the maintenance fire return interval? So if you've got a site that's a woody dominated mid-story and very little herbaceous ground cover, or a lot of mesophytic hardwoods like red maple or white pine, or things that are dominating the mid-story, how long does it take to get those back, and how often do you have to return fire to a place? We offer some comparisons and contrasts. I took on some fairly, I don't want to say contentious, but there's some areas that I delved into a little bit that I'm still working on, that are subject to a lot of interpretation, very subjective in some cases. Forest and woodland, and what is the definition of one versus the other, is always talked about in the Southern Blue Ridge, and why woodland should be a restoration objective, why that structure should be. We'll talk a little bit about succession, and go in a little bit about touch on fire severity and fire intensity, because that's obviously a huge factor in how our systems, how our ecozones respond to fire. And so then we sort of delve into each of these systems. We've got 5 that we really recognize as fire adapted. Probably the one that covers the most acreage together is just oak forests. We consider it dry oak and dry mesic oak. And so dry mesic oak in the Southern Blue Ridge is by far our system that covers the most ground. These are systems that are generally characterized by an oak overstory, predominantly usually white oak, but also northern red oak, some chestnut oak, some southern red oak, and scarlet oak as well. And so in these pages we kind of talk about the restoration fire frequency and the dry oak versus the dry mesic oak. We got some cool maps from Steve Simone's EcoZone data, where we kind of give you an idea of where the dry mesic oak and dry oak is on the landscape. That's a question I always really had. And picture, you can tell the preponderance of dry mesic oak is sort of on that southern periphery, as well as some of the dry oak on the southern and southeastern periphery of the southern Blue Ridge. The upstate South Carolina has a lot of dry mesic oak, as does northeast Georgia, where I am today. Talk about where you can find these sites and kind of the general topography, the landscape position, soils, and sort of natural disturbance events. I worked a lot. Probably the person I worked the closest with on this, and talked about all this, geeked out on this stuff the most, was Mike Shafley. And so a lot of his new descriptions in the fourth approximation helped to really inform this. We talk a little bit about the oak ecozones, especially in terms of wildlife, because as our regions and arguably the entire central hardwoods, one of the most important tree groups, tree genus is the oaks. It's important to, I thought it was important to touch on the oaks and their benefit to wildlife. So, and the oak litter is of course the key to all of our fires, carrying fire throughout our oak dominated systems. So talk about oaks, and then talk also a little bit about cultural significance of oak forests. Why did the Cherokee, why did they burn our oak forests? What were they trying to promote? What were the uses of the trees and mast and products that they would get from the forest, and why did they burn? Because I think that's important to inform how we manage today, and understanding the heritage of fire in the southern Blue Ridge. Talk a little bit about conservation challenges. I think when somebody's new to this system, it's kind of hard to figure out, well, what does good stuff look like? What are we shooting for? What are we aiming for? And what does that look like? And so we draw some comparisons to places that are unmanaged or haven't seen fire in many years, and typically have a mature overstory, closed canopy, greater than 95% closed canopy, versus the place on the right, which is a place where Dean Simons worked many years, the South Mountains game lands. This is the Leonard Farm tract where he's done oak shelter wood cut there, followed by burning at about every 5 years, and the ground cover response has been is really tremendous, and the ground cover diversity is fascinating. So you can compare some of these sites in photos. So whereas some of the things that we produce or try to provide some of the qualitative information for some of the work we're doing. I think pictures speak many words, and like I said, my idea with this generally is to take folks on a sort of a field trip of southern Blue Ridge fire adapted systems. And then for the fire managers or for the ecologists to sort of understand the fire management, know about frequency, intensity, and seasonality, sort of the fire regime of what we believe, and what we have fairly good evidence that fire was like historically, and what the fire regime is like today. So certainly in the case of a pine oak heath system, where we think it might have been historically low to moderate intensity frequent fire, it's characterized today by what we get in these late summer fires, early fall fires at Linville Gorge. They're high intensity. Oftentimes, it can be stand replacement in many cases, but generally speaking, that's not typically what we think occurred historically in all of these systems. So, and with each section, we go through the plants of the oak forest. So what would you, what are the characteristic species? So with dry mesic oak, of course, we talk about white oak, and we get into why it's culturally important, sort of the life history and what we know about the burning frequency, and what we've come to understand about how often white oaks can be burned, and at what intensity, and in what season. So this is all work in progress as far as the body of research as well. So I don't envision this, although we're going to print it. I don't necessarily envision it as never as being one and done. We'll come back and really update this as the science changes, as folks like Adam Coates and those folks research reveals new findings to us. We'll update this because we don't know everything about these systems. We've only had, although folks like Dean Simon and others have been, folks with TWRA, Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, have been burning for 20, 30, 40 years. A lot of the stuff we're doing on the national forest, we don't have that body of experience. And I was going to show, I also going to have a little section here about fuels that references Adam's fuels photo guide, because that's really critical for what those, I didn't catch the first end of Adam's talk, but those fuel models, the traditional fuel models don't always work for us in what we're dealing with today. We don't always talk about the most quote unquote species, but we also talk about species that we deal with the most, or we have a challenge with managing. So we talk a little bit about the ecology and life history of rhododendron, and also sort of put it in context of, how it's really changed the fire regime. So for instance, this picture, shortleaf sitting in this middle of a rhododendron thicket, well, that really changes the fire regime from frequent low intensity with herbaceous ground cover that facilitates fire to infrequent drought-induced high intensity wildfire. We throw in some little things right here, like how much comparison of how much it costs to treat rhododendron by different methods, because that's a frequently sort of asked question. Say, how can I go in there and manage rhododendron fire? So and red maple goes same along those lines. That's one of our most challenging critters to deal with. One of the most resilient trees, if in our entire Southern Blue Ridge ecoregion. It is pretty much present in any ecozone we have. So that goes through poverty oakgrass, some really great pictures from a response that they have coming on in South Mountains game lands. This is the huckleberry burn. That's some of Dean Simon's handiwork. Places in North Carolina, especially where we've seen good responses. It's a lot of it's due to the work of the North Carolina Wildlife Commission and Dean Simon, Brian Jacobs as well, and Gordon Warburton. Spreading aster. And so then we go into Pine Oak Heath. This is a cool one. I'm not going to go through this whole book. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what's coming out, so you could be as excited about it as I am. This is Green River Game Lands. This is the sort of we have a description of what we think Pine Oak Heath should look like, but then there's the reality, which is a wide natural range of variation with a oak understory component. And good forward response, diverse vegetation structure in these Pine Oak Heath communities, typically dominated by pitch and Table Mountain pine. And so in places we have these no burn images that are really striking. This one's from up in George Washington Jefferson in Virginia. And talk a little bit about Pine Oak Heath, and talk about the main players sort of in the Pine Oak Heath, which is Table Mountain and pitch pine, and fire adaptations. So my goal with this is to really make this readable. I love to delve into science literature, and that's what I do for my, I guess, pleasure reading. But I know most people don't, and I know fire managers definitely don't. So I wanted to put this into a easy to read format that even the private landowner could pick up and go through and understand. So I synthesized, I think, nearly 700, 800 different research articles and journals to synthesize all the science for this. Talk a little bit about Indian grass and mountain laurels and other challenging species to manage. So that's really just a summary of what's coming out. I just wanted to, when Margaret asked me a few months ago to come on and talk about it, it was, I would hope we'd be done by now, but yeah, we've run into some barriers, but nothing we haven't been able to overcome, and it's been a fantastic learning experience to me. It's revealed so much to me about the burning we do and the responses we get from the vegetation, and really the critical importance of getting back out in these units in the growing season. A lot of times we come out and we start getting these units ready in October, and then we prep them throughout the fall and winter and burn them in the spring. But the story is really when these places come on and you see the pollinators and you hear the chestnut-sided warblers, and you can walk through here and see of course the rattlesnakes and such. It's fascinating. So I think I think it's really important for field trips in the growing season. I definitely have had tons of chiggers, tons of ticks, and all this stuff because that's the place you find those. These are the places you find those things. So I'm hoping this will be helpful to the new and existing fire managers in the region, and provide a really photos and give everybody a real good mental image and some of the science behind why this fire interval worked for this site. Lastly, the caveat is certainly that it's not a cookbook. You can't make a recipe book for the Southern Appalachians and burning especially. So this is guidance. It's really just guidance of what we know and sort of the factors to consider. These sites are so different, so much gray area in between. There's no lines that delineate pine oak heath from dry oak or shortleaf pine out there in the woods. So it's guidance. It's not, you can't necessarily lift a prescription from anything in here. You can really inform your strategy and develop a plan, a piece of property that can definitely inform prescribed burn plans, but definitely not a recipe book. So that's really about all I have. I'll be happy to entertain any and figure out how to check this here chat box.
And if folks have questions they want to enter in the chat, Adam, I can just read them out to you. So we do have one about whether there's a projected date when this is going to come out.
Yeah, I want to say, what's today? August.
Yes.
August. I'm thinking about mid-October. Yeah, it's really cool. Nature Conservancy has this great program called Dakota Fellowship, and it offers someone that does a certain type of job an opportunity to do something different in another program. So when I had sort of the idea for this project, I was like, I need somebody that's really good at formatting this stuff. I can do the science part, but I need somebody to make it look good. And so I put the ad out there amongst the Nature Conservancy for someone to do this, and a really talented individual. Her name is Chelsea. She works up in our Arlington office and does the calendars for the Nature Conservancy. And so she gets all the credit for the formatting of all this and the production of it. She's brilliant, as you can see. It really helps. What she's done really helps tell the story. So I was really proud of what she's been able to do.
Some really nice comments just saying that the guide's gorgeous, really nice artwork. One question about whether there's a way to get notified when it's released.
Yeah, for sure. You'll know for sure through the prescribed fire council. Margaret will know, and Thomas Crate will know, and everybody I'll make it known. And it's going to be available free in the PDF form as well, electronically. I want this to be available to as many people as possible. We're going to print it, but and the Southern Blue Ridge Fire Learning Network has graciously agreed to pay for the printing of many of these. The Southern Blue Ridge Fire Learning Network has funded my time working on it. And so we'll print some. It's going to be bigger than what I anticipated, so I'll go beg Helen Moore with Consortium of Appalachian Fire Managers and Scientists for some money to print, and I'll find some other sources that want to pay for some more prints as we when we run out of these. Mountain bulbs and bogs, gosh, right? I started to go down that road, and it's like, when do you call an end to this project? It could go on forever. I'm thinking about doing something in the future. I wanted to get this out there, and for bulbs and bogs. I'll let you, Sharon. I'll let you help me with the bulbs one, and you can argue whether or not fire was a component in the formation of grassy bulbs and the maintenance, because I'm not sure I'm quite up for that. I can do bogs, okay, but bulbs, yeah. It's really interesting. They're a fascinating story too, because on the high elevation red oak. Oh, she put a picture of my dog in there. I hadn't seen that one. That's up at. So yeah. So then this high elevation red oak. Well, you might think grassy bulbs are sort of related. They co-occur. They're just always adjacent to each other, and we really don't know. This is the fascinating one, or the one we don't know the least about, which is this high elevation red oak forest. It's a quandary in a lot of different ways. Why did the Cherokee burn there? I don't know that we fully understand that. Did they burn it purposefully? Did it burn during drought periods? Did they burn grassy bulbs off, or was that more of a European settlement, cattle pasturing type thing? There's a lot of real interesting questions. Yeah, thank you. The mapping, that's all Steve Simone and EcoZone and Southern Blue National Forest in North Carolina, and others sort of contracting him to do these fascinating maps, which really help us prioritize burn units, so we're burning in the right places for the right reasons at the right times, and just trying to let the sort of the science and all the abiotic biophysical factors inform what we do and how we manage places.
All right, well, thank you so much, Adam, for that great presentation. And I will put, Adam, if you don't mind, his email in the chat box. So if you guys have additional questions, you can get in touch with
Adam. Thank you. Do that. Quick, I want to just acknowledge help the land managers. The land managers have been Ron Jacobs and Dean Simon and Tom Don Henry and Wes Bentley with the U.S. Forest Service in South Carolina. All these folks have really given a lot of their time and let me pick their brains on some of this stuff. Clarence Coffey with the Shortleaf Pine Initiative, and all kinds really contribute. It wasn't all about the science. It wasn't all from literature and journals. It was interviews and discussion over beers with land managers and hour and a half long conversations on the phone. Pete Bates, especially, trying to pull out all the knowledge that these folks who've been burning here for 30 years have. So there's a lot of that in there. So there's a lot of people to thank, and I'll make sure I capture all those in the acknowledgments of this book. But thanks for your time.